Well, thanks very much everyone, and a huge welcome to everyone who has come here today from all around the country with these wonderful green buses bringing a strong message to Canberra. And that message is, Tony Abbott, everyone is looking at the budget to make sure you deliver the funding for the 5th year of Gonski in this year's budget. No excuses, no delays ought to be tolerated. This is about every child in Australia being able, regardless of their background, regardless of where they live, being able to access fair funding for a decent education. That's not too much to ask, and it's fantastic to know that everywhere the Gonski buses have been, parents and communities have come out to say, yes, we want to make sure that the children of Australia who are most in need, who are the most disadvantaged, who have disabilities, can get the care that they need and the support they need and the right opportunities for education. And we call especially on those state governments like Western Australia who've been given a blank cheque under this government to go ahead and take the money but not to spend it on the schools most in need, those students who are most in need. Well, Colin Barnett, Western Australia is looking at you and Tony Abbott at the same time. Not only do we want the money in this year's budget, we want it to be spent to look after and make sure we educate every child in Australia and give those who are the most disadvantaged and those with disabilities the opportunity they deserve. And the Greens are absolutely behind the full implementation of the Gonski reforms. This has been a huge breakthrough, and it would be a tragedy in Australia, and history will judge very harshly Tony Abbott if he doesn't deliver this wonderful opportunity for a breakthrough in education. Education is the gift that everyone wants to give the children of Australia, and it's critical for the future of the nation, not only for people at a personal level, but certainly at a national level as well. We need everyone to be educated to their full capacity, and that means starting with good funding for our public education system, but great funding for every child who needs it wherever they live, and we are going to be right behind that. Penny.
Thank you. Well, as Christine said, we're very proud to be standing here with the AEU Gonski vans today, calling on Tony Abbott and his government to deliver the full 6 years of funding under the original Gonski agreements. The Australian Greens will not let Tony Abbott take away what is the best chance Australian kids have had to achieve a world-quality, world-class education. As Gonski panel member Ken Boston has reflected, disadvantaged schools in Australia are like the emergency wards of education. And that's why it's absolutely imperative that we actually have the final 5th and 6th years of the funding, the bulk of the funding, going to those schools so that we can get the specialists into those classrooms to make sure that the kids that need it are getting the assistance that they need. And like the AEU, we're hearing from parents and students and teachers across Australia making it really clear that they know they need that money in their schools to change the equality gap that we have in Australia at the moment between the least privileged and the most privileged students. And that's why I've moved for an urgency debate in the Senate today on the future of needs-based funding. And that's why we're saying to Tony Abbott, you must deliver the full amount of funding that's required under the Gonski agreements, because that's what the community is demanding. You've got to get on board. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Well, today marks the end of a 5-week trip, a 5-week road trip where we've travelled this big brown land. 4 vans left on the 10th of February, one from Hobart, one from Perth, one from Darwin and one from Brisbane, and they travelled this big brown country of ours. They visited many country towns. There were many stalls, many schools visits, many sausage sizzles, and the intention with all these visits was to talk to mums and dads, teachers and principals about what's needed in our schools. And we've yet to meet a single mum and dad who doesn't understand about the importance of investing in their child, of ensuring that all schools have the resources to ensure that their child, but importantly every child, is given the opportunity to succeed. This whole campaign has been about galvanising support for the full implementation of these funding reforms. To date, Tony Abbott at best has only committed to 1/3 of these reforms. 1/3 is not good enough. Our schools need the resources to implement the programs, the proven programs that will give every child that opportunity to succeed. The literacy and numeracy programs, the extension programs, the remedial programs, that greater individual attention necessary to ensure that no child slips through the cracks, necessary to ensure that every child achieves to his or her full potential. This is about the opportunity for every child's family, community, but also our nation as a whole. Our future productivity and prosperity relies upon it. Tony Abbott is the only politician, and his party are the only politicians who want to stand in the way of these reforms. History will judge very poorly anyone who seeks to obstruct or oppose the full implementation of these reforms, because without the full implementation of these reforms, our students won't get the resources they've been promised, and more importantly, the resources they need to make a difference. This funding system is sector blind and delivers funding on the basis of need. Those who are set to gain most are our disadvantaged students from low SES backgrounds, our Indigenous students, our students in rural and remote and isolated communities, our students with disabilities and those who are lacking English proficiency. Where a student has needs, the school will attract additional funding. And of course, that will allow all children, including our gifted children, to get more attention, the attention they need to achieve their very best. It's not good enough for Tony Abbott to be standing in the way of every child. Surely in this country, a country as wealthy as Australia, we should be investing in our children and reaping the rewards in years to come. We've campaigned a long time to ensure that we arrive at this point. And one thing's for certain, we won't stand by and see these reforms dismantled. The situation in Queensland, Northern Territory, WA is unacceptable. Those governments have effectively been given a blank cheque. There is no requirement for those governments to co-contribute their 1/3 share of the resources. Hence, those children are already starting 1/3 of the funding behind. There's no requirement for those governments to maintain effort and grow their budgets either. And in fact, there's no requirement for those governments to even invest this money in education. Hence, we're seeing cuts in education in WA and Northern Territory. Let's stop the politics. Let's embrace this once-in-a-generation opportunity so that every child gets the opportunity to succeed. No more politics. Let's invest in our kids. I'll hand over to Tom Calma.
Thank you, Angelo. In February last year, I was one of a number of delegations that walked with Angelo to visit Prime Minister Gillard and the Education Minister to talk about why it was important for the Gonski reforms to take place. Since then, there's been utter confusion out there in the market, in the workplace, in the home front, to understand what Gonski is about and what we as the education sector can expect from governments. It's too important a reform to be able to just dismiss outright. My interest particularly is about ensuring that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, people from low socioeconomic status areas and people with disabilities get a fair service out of the Gonski reforms. It's about money, but it's also about reforming the whole education system from preschool right through to higher education, even though the Gonski is focused on the schooling level. But if we want to, as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, get our children through as adults into the higher education system, we have to prepare them through the schooling system. And that preparation takes place even before going into entering the school system. And I believe that the government needs to focus a lot more on a number of aspects and getting clear messaging out to our people, to the people of Australia, about why it's so important that we get behind Gonski, that we don't try and shortcut the system, but really look at enduring reforms, because the people of Australia are speaking. And what we saw through the I Give a Gonski campaign is people standing up and saying, we want to be heard, don't just treat us by way of consultation for the sake of consultation. Listen to what we have to say, work with our education professionals and make sure that our parents and our students get the future that we all deserve. Thank
Lila?
you.
Sorry, thank you. It is absolutely indefensible that Tony Abbott is attempting to block the entitlement of every young Australian in our schools to access a quality and well-resourced education. The principles of Gonski are meeting the learning needs of all students, regardless of their life story, regardless of the school they attend or the educational jurisdiction they're enrolled in or the state or territory that they live in. This is about meeting the needs of students in all areas to ensure that their learning capacity is increased, that the capacity of the community is increased, and of course our country continues to progress on a competitive platform. We cannot afford to let Tony Abbott penalise the system for our young people. It is an absolute imperative that we get the 6 years of the full Gonski principles.
John? Name and title.
I'm John Falzon from the St Vincent de Paul Society. The Gonski review found a clear correlation between class background and the level of educational attainment. Now, more than ever, we face an opportunity where we can cut that insidious tie between income level and educational opportunity. The current inequality in educational resources in Australia is a recipe for entrenching inequality and perpetuating privilege. No parent in Australia should feel as if they are letting their children down because they cannot afford to pay top dollar for education. Because education is a common right, it's not a consumer good. Shame on a nation that fails its children for coming from a disadvantaged background, or for being a member of the First Peoples, or for living with a disability, or living in a remote area, or having English as a second language. Shame on a nation that does not grasp the opportunity to build equality and opportunity in education. If we don't try, we have already failed. We must be able to hold our heads high as a generation and say, we tried, we had the formula to be able to allocate resources based on student needs, and so we were willing to do away with inequality and to do away with the perpetuation of privilege. Thanks.
Geoff Scott, President of the New South Wales Primary Principal Association and a member of the executive of AGPA, which is Australian Government Primary Principals. All of the issues around Gonski have been well publicised. I think the pressures now must be on Tony Abbott to come to the party again and say, we are a fair income government. We're a fair income government for all of Australia. We're a fair income government for all students of Australia. We're a fair income government that's going to commit to the full funding of the Gonski reforms. This is an unprecedented opportunity for Australia to move forward and to make sure that every child attains a high standard. Already, states such as New South Wales are showing that our schools are benefiting from the initial tranche of Gonski funding. Students with a disability, Indigenous students, students from low SES backgrounds have all started on that trail. But it's a long trail, but it has too short an ending. We need to make sure that we have the 5th and 6th years of funding at the very minimum for Gonski to continue that good work that's happening. On behalf of the students in New South Wales and across Australia in our primary sector, Tony Abbott, have a listen to us. Thanks.
Peter Garrigan.
Peter Garrigan, I'm the President of the Australian Council of State School Organisations, and we're the national voice for parents in government schools. One of the things that we strongly believe, and we're hearing from all of our parents across Australia, is that the investment in a quality needs-based public education system is an investment in nation building. And the Gonski review, which was an independent review, clearly undertook a lot of research, and out of that research came a very strong version of evidence that identified the need to provide additional funding into needs-based areas within the government system. We're calling on the Australian government to stop playing politics. The research is in, and the research supports a strong, funded, needs-based educational public education system. Mr. Abbott and the Australian government, think about the children in your electorates. They are in dire need of support. They need to be educated in the 21st century and educated in a system that will prepare them for the future. We call on you to give on the full 6 years of government funding for government schools and ensure that our kids across Australia are prepared and ready for the future. It's the future that will create this Australian nation. Thank you.
Lana Reid, Principal ACT.
Thanks everyone. My name's Lana and I'm the principal of a local primary school here in Canberra. I'd like to just add to the debate by saying that pretty much right now, up on the hill behind us, the federal government has the amazing position of being able to make some decisions that will have a phenomenal impact on the kids of our future. Now, kids are precious. They deserve the best. And working in schools on a day-to-day basis, we know the evidence is there that if we can put the resourcing in the right places for the right children at the right time, that we can make a difference to these kids. That's what I'm doing every day, and that's what everyone is here to say today. Thank you.
Thanks, Lana.